Hi, and welcome to Newsmakers for inside analysis and behind-the-scenes commentary from Santa Barbara's top journalists and local political leaders about the most important news events in our community. I'm your host, Jerry Roberts. Tonight, we'll look behind these headlines. It's law enforcement versus mental health as the Supes take up the $1 billion county budget. The first infant on the floor of the U.S. Senate sets off a national debate about family-friendly workplaces, and top local news organizations fed up with trolls ban public comments for online articles. And then from San Andreas Street to Santa Maria, candidates are pointing toward the June 5th primary, and we'll have a discussion of all the political gossip. Our guest tonight, Nick Welsh, executive editor of the Santa Barbara Independent. Laura Capps, school board trustee and Democratic thought leader. And Lauren Bray, owner and publisher of EdHat. Thank you all for coming. Well, Nick, you wrote the mother of all poignant budget stories in the history of journalism, reporting on a woman who was at a Supes meeting and crying because her mentally ill son had come in conflict with a sheriff's office. How did that scene illustrate the choices that the board's facing in the budget?
Well, first of all, she only got verklempt. She didn't actually cry, but she got all choked up. But it was, this last week we had 3 very long budget hearings before the Board of Supervisors. It's sort of a dress rehearsal for the big show, which is in June, which is how do you slice and dice $1 billion plus budget. And what was interesting about this woman, her name is Toni Fox. She lives up in Los Olivos. She has a 33-year-old son who has a long history of psychotic behavior. And he's been hospitalized 3 times before in psychiatric hospitals. And the family was she gets before the supervisors, and she's talking about having a birthday party, and son goes out of control. They call the cops. They call 911 for help. And in the past, 911 came, the cops showed up, but the sheriffs, showed up with mental health emergency caseworkers. This time, the mental health emergency caseworkers didn't show. This time, she claims, the sheriff's deputy showed up in a very belligerent attitude. Her son is very afraid of the police. Anyway, bad went to worse, and before you know it, he's challenged the cops to want to fight, and one of the cops allegedly says, "I'll fight you." And not what you're supposed to do. And he jumps from the table he was on onto the officers. You know, he kicks, he punches.
And she was there because...
She was there because you have $1 billion budget and you have this $130,000 item. This is like money in the sock drawer. This is like lint in your pocket in the great scheme of things. And it would do something called CIT training, which stands for conflict intervention training, which is essentially a nice way of saying, please don't shoot the crazy people when you show up.
I think, let's see, please don't shoot. That would be a better act.
How do you de-escalate when you're dealing with people who are in a psychiatric break?
And Sheriff Bill Brown, facing a tough re-election challenge, said what?
Well, Bill Brown said, I feel your pain. I'm going to be here on May 1st to explain how much I feel the pain. Mental health is a huge problem. I get it, but I can't get blood out of a turnip. We're trying to get 27 additional positions. We're down $2.6 million as it is. We are down 50. We have 50 unfilled positions. We are hurting, and we just don't have $130,000 in our sock drawer.
Of all the things.
Of all the things.
Yeah.
And
so he didn't commit.
He didn't commit, but what his undersheriff, a guy named Bonnie Malekian, who's sort of the unsung hero, I think, of the department in terms of Bill Brown doesn't have the best relations with the Board of Supervisors, only one of the 4.
Or with the deputies.
Malekian still walks on water. Mm-hmm. They trust him. And so he has this big plan that he thinks will pay, a lot more money up front and we're going to save way more money down the road, and we'll take care of the CIT issue.
All right. So there's issues like that throughout the billion-dollar budget.
Well, I just love that the mom showed up.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
know. It
you know
was
that's
so- it really was.
democracy, and then you gave it more light. I mean, to highlight this tiny program,
Right.
but it's a super important program for the people that it impacts. So
Well, you know, I have to just say here, I already knew about her. I had
Okay.
reported
So
that
it was a
part out.
complete setup.
No, it wasn't. No, I already thought I had this in my ace in the hip pocket, right? I was gonna, and so I'm sitting next to Gina from News Talk, and I'm thinking, oh, I got this. I totally have her trumped, right? And then this woman shows up and does her gets verklempt, and then another woman shows up, who also has
The
a
same
psychotic.
problem. All right. Let me.
wait, so
You're a
what?
therapist.
Oh, I shouldn't have brought that up.
Lauren, what can you say about Nick?
Former therapist.
But wait, so what did the budget? What's happening
Yeah,
with the
so,
budget?
so the budget. So there's two things I want to ask you about. One is that it's heavily dependent on marijuana tax revenue, is
Yeah.
it not? And secondly, what's the impact of the lost property tax revenue from Montecito?
Lost property tax revenue on Montecito somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.6 million in property taxes. Then there's another 6.2 million in expenses that the county had to pay out. So it's like a $10 million kick in the gut to the budget.
So they're really counting on the pot money.
And so the pot, nobody knows how much money the pot ballot tax will bring in. They estimate between 5 and 25 million, which is a kind of a huge spread. It hasn't been approved by the voters yet, which is the big ticket item in June. But a lot of the supervisors are very eager to start spending the money already. And the administrators are really going to pretend we don't have that money. So that's sort of the tension.
And the CIT program is in or out?
CIT program is nowhere in any budget proposal anywhere.
All right.
Did any of Brown's challengers have a different opinion?
Well, none of Brown's challengers were there, but one of his key challengers is a lieutenant named Eddie Schway.
The Democratic endorsed.
He's been endorsed by the Democrats. To the extent that the CIT program exists is because Eddie Schway has made it exist. He sort of robbed Peter to pay Paul within his own sort of operations and sort of done it on his own time and is completely sort of, he's made it happen, but he was not there. And he's definitely, that's his whole campaign as far as I can tell.
Is it? So that's what he's gonna run against Brown.
He's going to say we need to be much more proactive in terms of dealing with the mentally ill.
All right, more to come. So Laura, after Senator Tammy Duckworth brought her infant onto the floor of the Senate, you stirred up some national debate with a hot take
That's right.
published on Politico calling Congress the least family workplace in America. What's your perspective on this?
Well, it's 2018, and 80% of members of Congress are male. So there's some issues going on. And Senator
But only
Duckworth.
50% of the newsmakers panel.
That's right.
Strong 50%.
That's right. So, you know, it was historic that a senator had, gave birth to a daughter while serving in the Senate. First time that ever happened. And same
Which is
week.
pretty amazing in itself.
Right. It's right. There's been 8 or 9 members of the House who have prior. But, the average age of the Senate is 62, and the average age of the House is 57. So my point is this is the one constitutionally sanctioned institution that sets policy for our families across America, yet it's a horrible place to work if you're raising a family. And that's why people don't do it. Mostly women don't do it because of that reason. And it's just a structural challenge that I think could be addressed because it's not in the Constitution. This voting schedule isn't in the Constitution. It's actually set by the Speaker and set by the Majority Leader in the Senate. And coincidentally, the Speaker this same week also decided to quit, Paul Ryan, and his explanation was that he was tired of being a weekend dad.
Yeah, but there's also no legislation coming out of the Congress that's particularly.
That's right. There's many reasons why Paul Ryan would no longer want that job anymore, including our president. But, convenient or not, it's an interesting,
in
interesting
terms of
excuse.
childcare and other
Yeah, there's
things.
nothing on childcare. There's nothing on sort of workplace structures that could help families more frequently than it is. And so we sort of wonder, why not? There's a lot of effort into getting women to run. Wonderful, and I think that we're going to see historic numbers of women who are going to win in 2018 from every level of government. But my argument, and just sort of looking at the data, the jobs that require travel, so whether it's state legislators or Congress, tend to be held by men.
Yeah, and I thought I think the reason the piece, it was fine writing and well edited, no doubt, but I think the reason the piece got picked up was because of your personal experience.
Right.
Your mom and your dad
both
right. represented us, and you saw what that travel.
Yeah, I saw what the lifestyle is, and again, I have to say this with a huge caveat because no one wants to feel sorry for members of Congress. I get that. Like,
I feel sorry for Salud.
I think it's.
But not because of.
What do they say? It's like they're least more. They're less popular than
reporters.
Yeah, probably. And, getting some sort of ailment. It's really, no one wants to feel sorry for them, but the truth is, I saw the lifestyle and it's pretty lousy. You fly, you spend a lot of time in airports, you miss a lot of things happening with your family. It was those kind of considerations that went into my mind when I decided not to run.
Yeah, that was the yeah, because you did think about running for that.
I did. At the time, my son was 3, and I just knew if I were to be successful, what kind of trade-offs that would be, and it didn't seem worth it to me.
Yeah. No. Do you think that this is an issue that people that are in your community are concerned about? In other words, child care, how can we make workplaces more... I know people in your community are very interested in making them dog-friendly.
Yeah. When you say your community, do you mean like a millennial?
Good.
What are you referencing?
No, I'm talking about the EdHEC community.
Oh, the EdHEC community, yes. Yeah, I think that's, I loved your article. I thought it was amazing that she was bringing about this perspective of women in politics, which isn't really covered that much. And it was bittersweet reading your article because I agreed with everything you were saying. And then I was like, well, but I want you to be in there because I want your voice. Like, I want you to run because I want to vote for you. And I want your voice in Congress. So we need more women that are talking about women's rights because a lot of men don't really know what's going on.
Excuse me?
Well,
she's not
forgot
talking
about that, Jerry. Yeah, you guys are exempt. I think in the EdHEC community, definitely, I think they're really ingrained in local politics, and then national politics we don't really bring in that much because it would just be like a hellfire of comments. But local politics, yeah, definitely, I think there's more a want and a need for diversity, and everyone's voices being represented, especially minorities and women, definitely.
So what did you hear back? What was the feedback you got?
Really good feedback, just interesting. People hadn't thought of it sort of that way in terms of, we love the women that do run, but if you stop and look at it, most of them have already raised their children, much like my mom did, or Nancy Pelosi, or Dianne Feinstein. You go down the list, but so it's just a structural barrier. If you look at locally, we haven't really sent anyone to Congress or to Sacramento that I can think of that has school-aged kids. I know Salud, I give him credit. I think his son is in high school. But young kids, it's just really a challenge.
Well, Josh Williams, who's county supervisor, he has a young daughter.
Yeah.
And he takes her everywhere.
Great.
I think he changed his daughter's diapers at a fundraiser where Bill Clinton was at. There is such a thing as oversharing. But there was actually, I remember seeing him hoisting his daughter up to the city administrator's office when the city administrator and Josh, who at that time was in Sacramento, were trying to deal with the whole armory acquisition issue with it, in terms of how is the school and the city going to do the dance together. So, Josh may overshare, but he is a parent, and he takes his fatherhood and being a father very seriously, and he's going to show you every step of the way.
But he couldn't do that if he was in the house, could he? Or could he? He would change the diaper on the floor.
No, so they just this last week changed the rules of the House, and the Congress is so slow to change any rules. That's another part of my piece. They just got a bathroom for women members of Congress off the floor. They got that bathroom in 2011. It's just a very old institution. It's a very white male institution that doesn't change. And they just this last week allowed infants on the House floor to accommodate Senator Duckworth. But there was grumbling among some older members even to do that.
All right. Well, that was a good piece. It's
Thank
on
you.
Politico.com. Plenty of free parking. Lauren, you were part of a forum sponsored by the Association for Women in Communications, AWC, to discuss why so many media organizations, including Newshawk and The Independent, have decided to do away with comments. Bill McFadden, the publisher of Newshawk, said it's undeniable that most commenters believed our rules were for other people, not for themselves. Not only did our story comments provide little actual information of use or interest to the vast majority of our readers, they were mostly vile, tiresomely repetitive, grossly speculative, and often flat-out hate speech. Not to put too fine a point on it. And I believe Matt Kettman, writing for the editors of The Independent, said the rare occurrence of a productive discussion is exponentially overwhelmed by diatribes from all trenches on the political spectrum. Anonymity only makes the conversations more hateful and irresponsible. Your business model, however, is based on trolls, essentially.
You call them trolls. I call them spirited locals. It really depends.
So how do you get around these problems that these other guys complain of?
Well, I think we're a bit of a different entity. Ed Hat isn't necessarily, we don't do exactly what Independent or Newshawk does. We are a community forum, discussion, online media platform that happens to have news, but we also have a lot of other stuff that really encourages community engagement and discussion. So that's kind of the lifeblood of what we do. So it would never be a consideration to get rid of comments at all. We're definitely trying to figure out new ways to kind of curb the negativity. But from my perspective, I think there's way more positivity than negativity on our comment boards. So we're going to stick with it and keep messing around to see what's going to make it work.
Well, one of the points that Tom Bolton from Newshawk and Matt Kettman from The Independent made on the panel was it's too labor intensive. We have to, we have to pay a reporter full time to monitor the comments. So how do you deal with it?
Right. I mean, from their perspective, I see why they have a full staff of journalists. We're not. Ed Hat is not journalists. We have a staff of people who enjoy writing and do a lot of other things, but part of their job description is website moderation, and part of that moderation is comment moderation as well. So that's built into kind of what we do. And depending on the story, depending on the news cycle, sometimes the comments aren't that bad and there's just a few of them, and sometimes there's a ton. So it can take up some time, but also not a whole lot depending on the day.
Do you know what, could you say like a percentage that you have to modify or delete or something like that, if you had to?
It honestly depends on how controversial the article is,
Right.
but I would say probably like 10% sometimes, on an average. For the most part, most of the comments I think stay. They don't really violate our policies at all. It might be something that I personally don't agree with or that other people wouldn't agree with, but doesn't really violate, it's not hateful in any kind of way.
Do you miss comments on your pieces?
Completely.
I do too.
I mean, it's really interesting.
Really?
Come to Ed Hat.
It's so weird because it used to be you write an article, all right, let's see what the comments are, and then you read them and you want to stick your head in the oven. You go, oh my God, this is so depressing. So now we got rid of them, and now you write, and you have no sense of who's
How
responding
it's landing, right.
and how it's landing, and how many people give a damn and they're going to say anything. I think, I mean, the argument that we were going to get information that was of a sort of a useful tip was always overhyped to begin with. I never thought we were going to get much of that. It was just a place where people could spout off. And I think if you had people use a name, even if it wasn't their real name, it tended to make them behave better, and it was less vile and hateful. I mean, some of it just is so nasty and personal, you really can't run it. But I think I wouldn't have minded had we tried to, go that approach, but then the issue was, look, we don't have the time to monitor it. We're scrambling to fill all the holes that we have as it is. We don't have the time for somebody to sit there and go, oh, well, is that crossing the line or is it not, and then dealing with the phone
How
calls.
much time does it take? I mean, how many? So you have
It
someone
honestly depends.
whose job that is, or everybody kind of does it?
Yeah, it's their staff members' job, but we also are experimenting with self-moderation, so we're having our readers do the work for us. They're voting comments up and down and flagging comments, so we get alerted when there's something that someone else might view offensive, and then we can kind of just monitor it based on that. But an interesting point about the anonymity where people say, oh, that makes people more brazen and they're more likely to be vicious, which I think that's true. I've also been on Facebook and have seen equally vicious comments from people who have like a photo with their grandchildren and like, their full name and their address and their job, and they're still vicious. So whereas I think anonymity does play a part, I don't think it's the full reason.
Right.
What is the psychology of a troll?
Oh, so glad you asked. I figured it out.
I mean, why?
I'm writing a book on it.
Seriously, I mean, it's just like, why am I going to go and write some hateful thing?
I think it's dopamine, right? You get a little, a little lift after you put out a zinger, right?
It could be, but at the same
You
time,
seem to know an awful lot about this.
what's your handle? But at the same time, I mean, there's always been like rude, negative people, and there's always been nice people, and you just give everyone has internet access, so rude people also have internet access, and they're going to be mean like in person and also on a platform. So I think it's just the way of nature. It's how people are, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right.
And there's that whole Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing where, people get on a keyboard and they're going to say things they're not going to say to your face.
Well, such as yourself.
No, I try to do both.
That's what the angry poodle is, right?
It's a small town, and if you can't back it up,
Right.
you better not say it.
All right. Well, speaking of a small town, we had the first forum in the District 3 City Council race the other night. Oscar Gutierrez, our former director, and Michael Vidal, a finance
Wealth
manager, and Ken Rivas, community activist, union leader, were all there. However, Elizabeth Hunter, the only woman in the race, a 22-year-old city college student, was not, and she's been very elusive. Josh went to her house. She lives with her parents, knocked on the door, and her mom said she's sick, she can't talk to you right now. It's got to be
There's
crazy.
been a cold going around, Jerry.
Well, I know.
We have it right here.
I know, that's what I wanted to
Tyler
say.
Hayden-
Did you get to meet her? Or?
No, Tyler wrote that story, and yeah, he did meet her.
And?
How do you find her?
He had to be persistent. He had to keep calling. He had to go through her parents.
Which is not what you want to see in a political candidate.
No,
really.
it's kind of comical. I mean, here she is. She's 22 years old. She's very green. She's living at home with her folks. And it does seem on the west side, her father is going around to the neighborhood bars, putting up her photograph and her flyers. And the parents are really running the campaign. And it seems sort of like,
but she does exist.
She
We've
does
confirmed
exist.
that.
She does exist. I don't know how much she actually wants it, but her parents seem to want it.
That's very strange. You have Anna Marie Gott is one of your frequent contributors, and she's one of the people that organized the forum the other night. Is there a lot of interest in this election, or people are not tuning in yet?
Yeah, I'm a West Sider. So I think it's really interesting, and a lot of people are kind of curious to see what the platforms are of all the candidates. I am really curious at this 22-year-old. I kind of want to know what she stands for and what. I think it's great that she's running. I mean, it's nice to have diversity. So I'm curious to see what her talking points are.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait. Anyway, I got a piece up about it over on the blog if you want to see it. What's going on in the sheriff's race? Is Sheriff Bill Brown going to win 50% plus one and thus avoid a runoff?
That would probably be the safe bet, but it's unclear. Bill Brown is going for his third term, and being a sheriff, at a certain point, you do sort of overstay your welcome. He is very formidable. He's been very effective in a lot of ways. He ran on the platform, "I'm going to get you in North County Jail." Unlike other sheriffs in the past who made the same boast, he's actually delivering it. The question now is, it's sort of like Moses coming down with the Ten Commandments, and everybody's saying, "Get the hell out of here. We don't want to read that stuff." And at this point, at this point, there's a lot of questions. Can we afford it in North County?
Moses was a troll.
The original troll.
It's a whole buzzkill. Here we are. None of this.
And the two And the two deputies running against
So we have
the
Lieutenant,
aforementioned.
we have the aforementioned Lieutenant Eddie Schway, who has been backed by the Democratic Party, has very little political engagement with the union. Then you have Brian Olmsted, another lieutenant, hails from the bustling burg of New Kiama, but he is very. He has a lot of managerial experience. He's got the Deputy Sheriff's Association.
And what's the case they make against the sheriff?
Yep. The morale is bad. The morale is low, and it is a serious issue. They haven't been able to fill about 50 positions between the jail and law enforcement positions.
And is that because of Brown's lousy relationship with the board?
No, I think part of it is, we had the recession. We've had serious financial issues. Law enforcement is really, really expensive. The jail is way more expensive than anybody thought it was going to be, and we thought it was going to be ridiculous. So that's part of the problem. And if you're working mandatory overtime, that's nice for a while.
But that's not an issue that Trump.
That's not
a voter issue.
No, voters are going to care about, was the evacuation good? Are we picking up undocumented people and turning them over to ICE? Voters are going to. Are we beating up people of color?
Yeah. All right, real quick. So, and then there's also 2 seats on the school board that are going to be on the ballot in November. One is the appointed incumbent, Ismail Ulloa, and the other's open.
Yep.
So what are you hearing about all the San Marcos High School parents? Are they going to get a candidate?
I would imagine they would. I'd be very surprised if they don't, but because they have a lot of energy. But I also haven't heard much energy around the recall, which I think, if I'm correct, the signatures are due in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen before November.
Which is a good
what
thing.
I'm hearing. I mean, I think it's going to. Well, that was your op-ed piece. That you said that they ought to focus on those 2 open seats. And,
Yes.
And go for the other ones after.
Yep.
Well, speaking of, so what is the morale on the school board amid all of this
There's been
political
a lot.
upset?
There's been a lot, and we've had a lot of meetings lately. This is a busy time of year in our schools, and so we're around each other a lot. It's a good group. We get along, but it's been challenging.
Yeah.
It's been challenging. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to tonight's panel, Nick Welsh, Laura Capps, and Lauren Bray. Thank you for watching, and please visit our website, newsmakerswithjr.com. Check out my blog posts on politics and media in Santa Barbara and beyond, and also our YouTube channel. You'll find an archive of our past shows if you have time on your hands, and special interviews. Thanks again to our director, J.P. Montalvo, to our crew, Susie, Ryan, Ken, and Lauren, and as always, our top-ranking, high-powered, high-energy senior executive producer, Hap Freund. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.